Yeah, we got to talk about this video on jw.org. The video follows Tom, a former Catholic who wanted to become a priest, but negative experiences eventually drove him out of the church. Then Tom meets Jehovah's Witnesses, who become a beacon of hope for an otherwise very cynical and skeptical man. But in his experience, how do Jehovah's Witnesses differ from the Catholics? And what did Tom have to say about his conversion? Okay, let's watch.
When I gave up on religion, there was such an emptiness. Because I really wanted to believe in God my whole life. I wanted to believe. Where were you? You knew I was looking for you, God. And I felt abandoned. Dad was very much a give back to the community kind of guy. My mom, her biggest quality is empathy. So growing up with that, I saw the best way to be helpful to people was also to become a priest. Because I thought those were the best people in the best position to be the most helped. When I was 18, I went to the college seminary, and that was the road to the priesthood. I left there angry because we were all going through the motions of ritual. There was no authenticity. After a few years, I entered a monastery in the United States as a counselor in training, working with alcoholic priests. But again, it reinforced my disappointment with the church, because here was the big secret. Here's where all the troubled priests go.
So when he turns 18, Tom enrolls in the seminary, but he left very angry and sort of felt failed by the priesthood. It was all about ritual. They were just going through the motions. He then transfers to a monastery in the US, where he serves in some sort of counseling capacity. This only reinforced his disappointment in the church and made him more jaded. Based on the dramatization, it looks like maybe he was in seminary from the mid to late 60s, early 70s. I'm gonna make a disclaimer. I have family and friends who are Catholic, love them dearly, but it's no secret that for decades, there was a systemic, festering child sexual abuse problem in the Catholic Church. Sinead O'Connor, a former staunch Catholic herself, used her platform as one of the most famous pop singers in the universe at the time to bring awareness to this problem when she ripped up a photo of the Pope during her infamous SNL performance. Of course, people at the time were outraged and tried to cancel Sinead, but even the church issued an apology several years later acknowledging that she was right. The 2015 film Spotlight also shed light on the subject. The plot follows a team of investigative journalists at the Boston Globe who uncovered child abuse in the Catholic Church in Boston that had taken place over a span of 30 years. The film won the Academy Award for Best Picture and was even praised by church officials at the time for bringing awareness to these crimes. So just like I know my friends and family, I can speak to their character, I know they're good people. It's clear that Tom had pure intentions in trying to join the priesthood. He was trying to satisfy a spiritual hunger or longing, but quickly became disillusioned. I can't help but think of how many men were possibly in his shoes who wanted to try to instigate or create positive change in the world, only to find that the avenue or system through which they were trying to achieve this was severely broken. I've heard so many stories from current and former elders who, like Tom, became witnesses because they thought it was the right thing to do. They thought it was the answer, serving in that capacity in Jehovah's organization, only to find out that the same problems exist, and no amount of good intentions or trying to change things from the inside out was going to be able to reform the system, because the root of the problem had already metastasized and spread throughout the whole organization. So I just find his background really interesting, because it seems that Tom was in the thick of a really poisonous, deceptive operation that no one would be able to truly comprehend until decades later, when survivors started coming out and speaking up and sharing their stories. But he also made interesting statements at the beginning about, it was all about ritual and going through the motions. I'll address that later.
I felt everything I had believed in had been a lie. I tried Zen Buddhism. I tried Tibetan Buddhism. I went through all of the churches, and there was nothing there. Nothing. And I said, we're done. By this point, I had a real edge. I was a very, very angry person. I felt the world had done me over. I noticed that was reflected in my photography. There were less and less people in the pictures and more buildings and objects. As a psychology professor, as a counseling professor, my mission was accomplished if my student could leave that class and had learned how to think for themselves and not just to take in what they're being sold. I had a thing about organizations lying to people.
When Tom asked me to study with him, I did feel intimidated because here you had a man who was a professional in the secular world. He was a teacher at college, a psychologist. So to me, that was a challenge.
I had a big old notebook of questions, and he sat beside me, and he said, so you have some questions? And I said, yep. Here we go. So how does your organization handle child sexual abuse? How does the money work? What's the check and balance? Where's the transparency? And what I noticed, what he always did, he answered them from Scripture. This was revolutionary in my mind because these were not just some institution's views or some individual's views, but this was the very authority of God. You know, studying the Bible changed my life for the better, completely. I love the diversity of the congregation. I'm learning so much about how we're all the same. I have a lot more pictures of people, but I'm still learning. I learn every day. And that's the difference. I have confidence in what I'm learning, confidence that it's the truth.
I've seen a lot of videos produced by the Watchtower machine. I've seen things that make me roll my eyes. What BS are they spinning this week? But this video has to be one of the most vile displays of hypocrisy they've ever produced. It's as if the brother who sat down and wrote this video, the brother who works in the writing department, thought, what is every accusation that has ever been brought against us that's true? How can we list them all in one disgusting, hypocritical, misleading video? Let's see, a long-standing history of lying to our members, including multiple failed prophecies, check. Every other church and belief system is a waste of time, check. Tell people to think for themselves only to completely contradict our claims of intellectual freedom and then demand subservience to the governing body, check. In fact, once you become a Jehovah's Witness, you'll be told to avoid independent thinking like the original independent thinker, Satan. And if you do think for yourself and reach the conclusion that the Watchtower organization is a complete sham, and you decide to leave, you will be brutally shunned by those who kissed your ass the first time you walked through the doors of the Kingdom Hall. Check. Tom is a sincere man who is clearly going through severe emotional and psychological pain over the fact that he can't seem to find his spiritual home, his spiritual footing. He didn't feel safe in the church. He said everything was ever taught. He felt like it was a lie. And, he says as a professor, in so many words, he felt a sense of peace or a measure of peace, knowing that he had equipped his students with the ability to think for themselves, to not just take in what they've been sold, or more specifically, be aware of organizations that lie to people. And yet, Tom found himself again embedded in an organization that is guilty of all the things he is vehemently against. This video produced by the organization is not only a blatant PR tactic to mitigate the accusations that have rightfully come against the organization in the new millennium, specifically that they don't let their members think for themselves. They do expect you to just blindly accept what you're told, but it is also a complete mockery of a genuine man who was lied to and exploited again by a religious institution that is guilty of the very things that destroyed his trust in organized religion in the first place. All right, so let's back up. He said something like, I felt disappointed or angry that everything was ritualistic. It was all ritual. It was void. The priesthood was void of authenticity. It just felt like we were going through the motions. This was wildly amusing to me because everything that Jehovah's Witnesses do is ritualistic and completely void of authenticity. From the way they dress, how they conduct their meetings with routine song and prayer, to preaching every weekend like clockwork, to using certain loaded phrases and jargon that only Jehovah's Witnesses will understand. Jehovah's Witnesses go through the motions. And a particularly bizarre moment, he said something about, I really appreciated the diversity of the congregation, but sort of in the same breath says, I'm learning just how much we're all the same. Okay, if you're looking from a purely surface level racial and ethnic diversity, okay, I'll give you that. But how in the hell do you make such an oxymoronic statement that you love the diversity and yet we're all the same? Isn't that the very thing you were trying to avoid? Ritual, going through the motions, the whole hive mentality, the lack of individuality. Tom's Bible teacher was able to successfully convert Tom because Tom was emotionally vulnerable. He was tired of being mad at the world, he craved community, and unfortunately his glasses were not his only blind spot. All right, you're a psychology professor, you have counseling experience, you know the scientific method, you know how to write a dissertation. Then you were emotionally manipulated into joining the Jehovah's Witnesses. You sure as hell cannot say you converted on the basis of research and critical thinking. Somehow, some little synapse in his brain got fried, and he was completely unable to see the glaring parallels between his past and his present. Tom went from one abusive thing to another. Frying pan to the fire. I mean, don't you find it interesting that the first burning question Tom had was, how do you handle child sexual abuse? How is money handled? Where are the checks and balances and transparency in your organization? The organization knows it's guilty of its own massive systemic child sexual abuse problem and has come under fire in multiple countries. That its donation system has surreptitiously funneled congregation funds to fight mounting lawsuits, and that the rank and file members of the organization are largely unaware of what their religious leaders are doing behind closed doors. It is no coincidence that the organization laid out these offenses in tidy bullet points that our brother Tom could just wipe away and seemingly absolve the organization with his testimony. Tom said that studying the Bible changed his life. Okay, great. But conflating themselves as an organization with the Bible as if they are one is a really sneaky, almost steel-manning attempt to ignore very serious issues Tom was bringing up. He's trying to address some serious issues of how do you deal with institutional abuse, etc., etc. And basically his teacher is saying, well, look, we're the same as the Bible. So therefore, nothing to see here. Nothing to see here other than smiling faces and warm hugs and selfies. No, that's not what I asked. And yet, Tom buys it. If Tom is serving as an elder, which I imagine he is, but I guess I can't say that for an absolute certainty, I don't know. But if he is, there's no way he doesn't know what's going on. This video was produced in 2015. Yeah, no way he doesn't know some stuff, and which makes me wonder where he's at mentally now, like what sort of headspace he's in. I have hope that possibly because Tom was so earnest, that because he's educated, and I don't mean that he's superior, he has a reference point outside of the witnesses. He grew up in a loving, home, had a good family life. He made friends and socialized with other people. I'm hoping this is enough. I'm hoping that that's enough to lay the foundation for him waking up and freeing himself of the hypocritical shackles of this organization. And yet another part of me just thinks if he does wake up, it might destroy him. I don't know. Yeah, this video pissed me the hell off. Yeah, that's basically it. I don't have anything else to say. On that note, hope you guys are enjoying the beginning of the year, and I will see you guys soon.